Hey, Bill, why don't you go ahead and get going? I think that what I'm gonna do is on the side, put out an email just to remind the folks that haven't shown up yet that, oh, well, it is today.
It is today. It is now. Okay, well, greetings. My name is Bill Thomason. My call sign is November 6, November Bravo November. I'm in Bellevue, Washington, using their excellent library at a study room. And we're going to go over 3 different sections of the technician class, part 2, about station operation. And we've got 20 minutes for each of the sections. So we've got some time to talk about things. Basically, there's a total of 38 questions in the 3 sections. If you know the answers to all 38, then you're going to pass all 38 of those. You'll only have 1 question from each section, but you definitely need to know the answer to all of them. So let's look at number 1. Very important thing when you're starting out at ham radio. To know how to program your radio, you have to know how repeaters work. And so there is a standard offset for each of the bands that we tend to start with in ham radio, the 2-meter band and the 70-centimeter band. So in question 1, the first thing you need to get out of the question is which band you're in. This is about 2 meters, meaning around the 144 megahertz. On those kinds of repeaters, you just have to remember this, plus or minus 600 kilohertz. So in this case, the answer would be B. And we have time, so if people have questions, please stop me. Okay, number 2, national simplex calling frequency on the 2-meter band. So right away, answers C and D are off the table because they are not in the 2-meter band. It turns out that 146.52 is the standard calling frequency. Again, that's a memorization thing, but as soon as you see it, you'll probably remember it. Okay, on the 70-centimeter band, we definitely want to key in on which band we're in. That's 5 megahertz. So in this case, the answer would be A. Okay, how do we get other station's attention on a repeater if you know their call sign? Maybe you've heard them talking for a few minutes and they've taken a break from the current conversation. So if you know their call sign, the correct answer is B. You say their call sign, your call sign, and then you unkey your radio. And then you wait for them to respond. You don't say CQ, you don't wait for them. You know them, they're probably listening. Their call sign first, then your call sign. Okay. Let's say you are listening to a channel and you hear somebody calling CQ. That means they're just looking for a conversation. So since you've heard them say their call sign, you now know what call sign to call them by. So again, you're going to transmit their call sign first, followed by yours. So in this case, the answer would be C. And by the way, the tests aren't going to be in the same order. The answers will be mixed up. So do not memorize the letter. Definitely work on learning and practicing and passing the practice tests by giving the right answer, whatever letter of the alphabet it happens to be. When you're making on-the-air test transmissions, the only correct answer here is A. You have to give your call sign. Let's say you're testing your programming of your radio and you want to see if you can ping the repeater. In other words, you transmit, unkey, and you hear a beep. Many repeaters give you what's called a courtesy tone. You have to give your call sign when you're done testing. And it never hurts to say it when you begin testing either. You could say, I would say N6NBN testing and on key. That is a legal transmission. If I don't say anything after that point, I have not violated FCC rules. I just gave the one transmission and it had my call sign in it. Okay. What is meant by repeater offset? This is the similar concept that we just touched on at the beginning of this series. The idea that a repeater is listening on one frequency and transmits on a different one, and there is a known difference between the two. And that's called a repeater offset. So answer in this case would be A, the difference between a repeater's transmit frequency and its receive frequency. And again, back to question one briefly. In 2-meter band, the common offset is 600 kilohertz. In the 70 centimeter band, let's go to this one. The common offset on repeaters is 5 megahertz. So you always want to look at that band in the question, make sure you're looking at the right band. Okay, let's go to number 8. What does this CQ thing mean anyway? It's left over from the Morse code days because it's a very recognizable combination of dots and dits. It means I'm looking for a conversation. I'm just on the air. I might say something like CQ N6NBN. In point of fact, on repeaters, it's very uncommon and kind of rude actually to say CQ. Most of the time, you just want to let people know that you're listening. You could say, I would say, for instance, N6NBN mobile. That's the way I tend to introduce myself on the air. That's a legal transmission. People who know me might call me back because I usually am on a repeater that I'm known. But regardless, I've announced that I'm on the channel and I'm listening. So D is the correct answer. Calling any station. I'm not looking for any particular person. I'm available to talk if you'd like. Very similar question here. What brief statement indicates that you are listening on a repeater and looking for a contact? You could just say your call sign, B. Hello test isn't bad, but it doesn't really imply that you're looking for a conversation. You don't have to know the call sign of the repeater, so answer C doesn't make any sense. QSY is an actual procedural code. That means you're going to change frequencies. So that's not what you want to be telling people. If you want them to talk to you, you don't want to tell them that you're leaving the channel. So just saying your call sign is fine. What is this band plan idea? This is beyond the privileges established by the FCC. This is something that takes the load off the FCC. This is a voluntary compliance in a geographic area, let's say Western Washington, where to make sure that repeaters don't stomp on each other, in other words, too many repeaters on the same frequency or too close to each other, we have an organization called the WWARA, and it's a volunteer organization, but they keep us organized by helping us use the bands that we're legally allowed to use and section those bands for different kinds of activities. Some parts for repeaters, some for simplex, some might be for data only. It's a voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. So the FCC is not involved as long as we're within the frequencies that we're supposed to be within. We're allowed, but this is so hams get along with each other. We're very cooperative types of people. So it's definitely A. It's not mandated. It's voluntary, but we all like to get along. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? It means you're not using a repeater. Simplex. That is the term that we use. Answer is C in this case. That means when you key up and you're looking at your radio display, the frequency does not change. Not all radios show you that sort of thing, but it's nice to have it, especially when you're learning, to watch the frequency actually change if you're not doing simplex. But when you're transmitting and receiving on the same frequency, that's called simplex. Okay, well, how do I know what frequency to try calling CQ? I'm looking for a conversation. Which of the following is a guideline when choosing an operating frequency? Listen first to make sure that no one is using it. That's very polite. Never hurts to ask if you don't hear anything. Sometimes we might have a net going, but there's a silent period, maybe a moment or two, and you just happen to dial in during the silent part, and you can't tell that it's been in use. Or there might be an event going on, a parade or a bicycle event. It never hurts to ask if the frequency is in use. Make sure that you're on a legal permission band, that you're within your frequency. Most of the time, our radios are only allow us to use amateur frequencies. That's not as much of a worry, but we are required by FCC regulations to know what frequency we're transmitting on. So actually, all three of these answers are correct. D would be the correct answer. Any questions on any of these? Okay, let's go to section B, T2B, VHF and UHF operating practices. 14 questions total. You will have one question from this section on your test. Okay. What's common use of the reverse split function on a VHF/UHF transceiver? It allows you to briefly listen to the opposite frequency. In other words, instead of listening to the repeater like you normally would be, you're actually listening on the input frequency of the repeater. So you might hear when somebody's transmitting, if you can hear them on the input, that means they're geographically close to you. And that means you might want to talk to them on a simplex frequency and give the repeater back to other people. So basically the answer here is you want to listen temporarily on a repeater's input. That's the frequency that the repeater is listening to, which is the frequency on our radios that we're going to transmit on. It's in reverse. Repeater is listening to one, we're transmitting on that one. When the repeater repeats on the other frequency, that's the one we're listening on. It's a little confusing until you get to do it, and then you go, oh, okay, this is fine. What term describes the use of a subaudible tone transmitted along with normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver? The term is CTCSS. Continuous tone carrier something squelch. I should know it and I don't, but it's CTCSS. That's an industry standard term for this concept of a subaudible tone that's continually transmitted. When you program your radio correctly, this is what repeaters listen for. There'll be one particular tone, for instance, that you need to have your radio transmit, so the repeater repeats what you're transmitting. That's a CTCSS code. If a station is not strong enough to keep a repeater's receiver squelch open, which of the following might allow you to receive their signal? I would say A, Open the squelch on your radio. So you back the squelch off enough that you start hearing, if there's nobody transmitting, you'll hear static. But if their signal is weak, especially on a simplex frequency, you crank the squelch just off of the point where it's quiet, and you might be able to hear them. So the answer in this case would be open the squelch on your radio.
I want to give an example of the sound.
Sure. Let's see, do I have any radios in my pocket? I might.
So this is squelch open, and that's with it squelched.
I'm sorry, we didn't hear anything, Steve.
Oh, didn't you? It was right next to the microphone. I'll just turn the volume up. Did that do
Not
it?
hearing anything.
Amazing.
Let me see if I got anything in my pockets. Got a couple of HTs here.
Channel mode.
Let's see if I can get this thing to squelch.
Eugenia to the back room. Thank you.
Did that work?
I don't know enough to make this radio do that. Oh, here we go.
Menu.
My microphone's just not letting it go through.
Welch.
Sorry, I'm not getting anywhere. We'll move on. All right. It sounds like, how about that? Okay, question 4. Which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater? You can hear the repeater, but when you try to key your radio, nothing happens. You're not getting that courtesy beep. Could be you don't have the offset program correctly in your radio. You may not have the right CTCSS tone programmed in. There's a few repeaters in the Puget Sound area that use DCS, but very rare. That's a digital coded squelch. Many radios can do that, but most of our repeaters do not use that feature. So it turns out all of these choices are correct. Could be either the wrong tone or the wrong offset or both. What might be the problem if a repeater user says your transmissions are breaking up on voice peaks? That means if you have a loud voice like I do, and you're talking directly into the microphone, you could be overpowering the audio capability that your radio is trying to turn your voice into something and push it out over the air. So if you're overdriving your microphone, that's sometimes called over deviation. So probably you're talking too loudly. Doesn't have anything to do with the power that you're transmitting on your radio. So you back off the microphone a little bit. I have to do that because I tend to be loud. The voice peaks is the key. That will key you on this answer. That you're only when you're hitting the loudest parts of your speech are they having trouble hearing you. What type of tones are used to control repeaters linked by the Internet Relay Linking Project? That's a way of hooking repeaters together over the internet. The correct answer would be DTMF, dual tone multi-frequency, just like a regular touch tone phone uses DTMF. That means when you transmit, you hold the transmit button on your radio and you hit the buttons on the front of the radio, depending on the model of the radio, and you send a certain code. So these audio tones tell the repeater to do a certain thing. In this case, you're asking the repeater to connect to another repeater somewhere in the world that has a unique number. And so part of the tones that you are typing on your radio are telling the local repeater which other repeater you'd like it to try to connect to. And this was the earliest way that people were hooking ham repeaters together over the internet. There's other systems available now, but it's still around, IRLP. And it's the same concept on the other ones. It's a sequence of tones that instruct the repeater to make a connection for you to some other repeater. DTMF is the answer. How can you join a digital repeaters talk group? This is a new concept in what's called DMR, digital mobile radio. You have to put a certain number into your radio along with things like the transmit and receive frequencies and a tone. But also there's a number that goes along with it when you're doing DMR. It's a new type of digital radio protocol. And so when you see this term talk group, that is specific to this new kind of radio, DMR. That's what, let's see, you guys can't see me because I'm screen sharing. I'm going to stop share for a second. Okay, this is an Anytone 878 dual band DMR handy talkie. It's very fancy. It's got a color screen, has lots of things built in like a GPS. Okay, back to screen sharing. Talk group. So the answer would be program your radio with the group's ID of the talk group that you're trying to join. Okay, which of the following applies when two stations transmitting on the same frequency interfere with each other? Back to the courtesy part. We are sharing resources that we are licensed to use. No one has an absolute right to any frequency on amateur radio. So the correct answer is A, common courtesy should prevail. So the best thing to do is back off, just like if you accidentally interrupt somebody at a cocktail party, you're both starting the same to say something. The correct thing to do is stop talking and wait for the other person. Strongest signal does not have priority, weakest does not. Frequency the longest, none of that matters. It's common courtesy, cooperation. Okay, again, another question about the talk group on a DMR repeater. And the correct answer is B, a way for groups of users to share a channel at different times without being heard by other users. In a way, it's sort of like a squelch, but instead of setting a tone on your radio so you don't hear other users, you're actually telling your radio, I only want to hear other people on this frequency that are in group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've programmed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into my radio. And then I will only hear those people. Other people could be using the frequency, but they can, of course, be talking at the same time. But you won't hear them when they transmit. Sharing a channel is what it's about. Oh, okay, here we get into some of the common Q signals. These are common abbreviations that let people quickly say something that we want them to know. The QSY we hit earlier, meaning I'm going to switch channels. That's it. That's one you will learn. Which Q signal indicates that you are receiving interference from other stations? The way I remember this one is the M or the N. M for man-made, N for nature. So if, let's say, you are near some power lines and you hear a strong buzz on the frequency, that we would call QRN, N, November N. But if it's interference from other stations, that would be considered man-made interference. So that'd be A, QRM for man-made. And what else we got here? Here's another Q signal. Here we go. Change frequency. QSY. I think of this one, I made little mnemonics. S for switch, Y for yes. So QSY means I'm going to switch channels. So I remember the switch, yes, as the mnemonic, QSY.
Bill?
I don't know what QRU means. QSL means okay or got it. That's just kind of an okay term. And
Bill?
yeah,
QRU is no traffic, but there's a question in chat from Anita wants to know whether the list of Q codes. I gave her out the Wikipedia list, but that's far more than she. Small list that they need for the what's in the exam.
only what's
So-
here, as far as I know. If it's not mentioned in one of these 14 questions,
Okay,
there's no other. I doubt if you need to know more than maybe a half a dozen. We've got QRM, QRN, QSL, QSY. QTH means a location. People ask you what your QTH is, and my mnemonic for that is there. The first two letters of there, TH. QTH means where I am or where are you. So there's a good half a dozen that are used commonly. QSL means okay. QSY means switch channels. And sorry, Steve, what did you say QRU means? I've never used QRU.
QRU is checking into a net or something and saying that you have no traffic. You also can say QRU.
Okay, you're saying you don't have anything to talk about.
Right.
Okay,
traffic.
that's a good one. I didn't know that one. And QRZ has to do with our information, right? Who we are. Is that correct? Like QRZ.com is a website to look up hams. But I don't actually.
Yeah, I got to get back off of mute.
Because we're ahead of schedule here, so we could definitely divert into questions. And thank you for catching Anita's question. Looks like there's some other. Okay, you answered her. Yeah, I see in the chat. CTCSS, good. Thank you for putting that in.
So QRZ is normally used. You'll hear it mostly when people are in contests, and the station hears somebody, but they didn't catch a call sign, so they'll
Mhm.
say QRZ, and
Like,
that just
who are
really
you?
is, yeah, basically who's calling me.
Okay, that's a good one. And that makes sense because the website QRZ.com is how to look up call signs and find out who people are.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Why are simplex channels designated in the VHF UHF band plans? So that stations within mutual communications range can communicate without tying up a repeater. So they actually, on every band, the band planners set aside specific frequencies for simplex conversation. So if you and your partner are at Costco and you're using your handy talkies, you might both have the same simplex frequency in your radio, which is in the band for, you're legal to be transmitting on. And that way you are legal. You're talking back and forth. You're not using a repeater because you're within range of each other. That's why they're in the band plan. So in this case, the answer would be A, within mutual communications range. Yeah, the other three answers don't make any sense in this case. Where may single sideband phone be used? Phone meaning voice transmissions be used in amateur bands above 50 megahertz. I would say that would be A. I'm not positive, Steve, but I think you'd have to have a general class or higher to do single sideband above 50 megahertz. Am I don't, none of the other answers make any sense, but I'm not exactly sure. What do you think?
Well, I'm I'm sitting here looking up how many Q signals there are. So
Oh, you're
I
still
was just-
stuck on Q signals. Okay,
no, I was gonna put that answer, I was gonna look it up and then put the answer in chat, because
Oh,
I don't
thank
know
you.
how many of those are used, so I was looking through the exam. Let's see,
Yeah,
question.
I could put the ones that I talked about in chat. I mean,
No,
it's
I'm
a
just, I
very,
just I want to give Anita an explicit list of the ones she needs to know for right
okay.
now.
That's a very good question. I don't think there's too many outside of this group of questions, but we're only working on T2 tonight.
Okay, so single sideband phone in amateur bands. I would think it would probably be D, but I'm not sure.
Well, I'm going to Google it. I am not afraid to Google. Amateur radio operators have some portion of all amateur bands above 50 megahertz where they are permitted to use SSB. Oh, that's interesting. In at least some portion of all of these bands, they're saying is the correct answer. Okay. Well, that was important to look up.
Oh, yeah, okay. I say I wasn't reading that quick enough. I was still back.
But
on
it's
the-
interesting that this is on a technician. So I guess technicians can do 10 meter SSB, right?
Yeah, but it said above 50 megahertz.
Right. So that would,
That would leave out,
yeah, 10 meter is,
10 meters.
I just spaced
20,
off on that.
29, 30,
Yeah, yeah.
28, right in that area.
Okay. And you're putting a good list of Q codes in there. Thank you, Anita. Okay, so in this one, the correct answer is in at least some portion of all these bands above 50 megahertz. That's going to be one you're going to just have to remember. Last question in this section. Which of the following describes a linked repeater network? I would say the correct answer is A network of repeaters where signals received by one repeater are repeated by all of the repeaters. In other words, there's at least a temporary, if not a permanent connection. Up on Vancouver Island, I understand there's a very nice system that does this. If you can get into one of the repeaters, you're being retransmitted by all of them. So wherever you are in that general area, especially for boaters, you've got the power of all those repeaters rebroadcasting whatever you're saying on one of them. That's a linked repeater network. Any questions on any of T2B, folks? Okay, we're cooking here. Let's get into public service, one of my favorite topics. T2C, 12 questions. You will see one question from this section on your test. When do the FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station? Never. Never. Some people would say, well, what about emergencies? That is covered under FCC rules. So if you're following FCC rules and you have to transmit something that's not allowed on the rules, but there's immediate risk to life or property, a true emergency, that's not what they're asking here. Emergencies are included in the rules. So the FCC rules always apply. That's the answer. What is this NCS? There's so many acronyms we're going to get thrown around. NCS, Net control station. That's generally the station that's running a net, somebody that's keeping it organized, letting each person know when it's their turn to talk about their sauerkraut recipes or what their dogs did today. Net control station, NCS. Question 3. What should be done when using voice modes to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly? The correct answer is use the phonetic alphabet, which means you have to practice it and memorize it. I practiced it by reading billboards to myself as I was driving. I would spell the words, because you still have to watch out for traffic, of course. But I'd spell the words to myself using the phonetic alphabet or license plates. So C in this case, spell the words. My call sign, for instance, is November 6, November, Bravo, November. That's using the phonetic alphabet, especially if I'm on a channel where people don't know me. I want to make sure they get my call sign right. And my name is Bill, Bravo, India, Lima, Lima. Question 4. What do RACES and ARES have in common? You will hear both of these terms having to do with emergency communication and emergency planning. Number 4, I'm sorry, D. The answer is both organizations may provide communications during emergencies. Generally, ARES is applied to a group of hams attached to an agency, such as a police department, a fire department, a county, a hospital. RACES has to do with federal government and true emergencies, where they can actually say, unless you are a RACES station, you cannot transmit. That's only happened, as far as I know, once. That was during World War II. So the answer again is both organizations may provide communications during emergencies. They're not clubs. They don't do road and weather. And C is totally wrong. Question 5. What does the term traffic refer to? Why do people talking about traffic all the time? Formal messages. That means people are keeping track of what's being transmitted. Somebody else is writing it down. Formal messages exchanged by stations on a net is the correct answer. Do you have traffic? Is a question a lot of people you'll hear on a net, meaning, do you have something you need to say? Do you have a message to be transmitted? Number 6. Which of the following is an accepted practice to get the immediate attention of a net control station when reporting an emergency? You got people talking on a net and they're talking about their day and their plans and shopping, and you get a gap that you can get in and you've got a real emergency. Your cell phone doesn't work and you've just stopped at an accident. Priority or emergency followed by your call sign. Don't say break. That doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. It just means you want to talk. It doesn't say that you have something truly important. The word priority or the word emergency and your call sign. And then net control will hopefully immediately come back to you and say, everyone else be quiet, go ahead, so-and-so. Which of the following is an accepted practice for an amateur operator who has checked into a net? And you're going to do nets as soon as you get your license. So this is important stuff. This is how we stay organized on a channel where you don't know how many people are on the channel. And if you're transmitting, you can't hear anybody. So we have to share nicely. So what is the accepted practice? And here, I believe they're talking about an HF net. I'm just by the language here. Announce the station, call sign location every 5 minutes. Oh, I see what they're saying. Steve, I'm pretty sure answer C is the right one on this one. Once you have checked in, Net Control knows you're out there. So then you wait for Net Control to get back to you. They've got a list of people that have checked in. So C, I believe, would be the correct answer. Continue listening to frequency. Don't transmit. Other people are talking. Net Control will get back to you because they wrote down your call sign earlier. So the answer would be C. Yeah.
See, the way I would look at it is, you're talking about changing frequencies in B and then making announcements every 5 minutes. Wait a minute, this is the net. You're not going to, unless you're the net control, you're not going to be transmitting. So the only one left, other than all, because you've already eliminated 2 of them, has got to be on the, it's got to be C.
Yeah, good, thanks. And question 8, which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling? Definitely not B. That's not our job. We don't edit. Definitely not C. We're not allowed to talk to the media about anything we hear on our radios. The only correct answer here is A. Passing messages exactly as received. Typos and all. That's her job. And remember, we're in the public service section here. This is when you're doing radio, not just casually. You're doing it to serve an agency. You're helping out. Her job then is to supply communications when other systems are not working. And so we may be passing a lot of messages. We don't get to edit them. We just pass them. Excuse me. All righty, let's go to 9. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class? Here we go with what a true emergency means in terms of FCC rules. Only D is the correct answer. Immediate safety of human life or protection of property. I've had hams get in arguments with me saying that, well, it's an earthquake, so it's an emergency, so all rules are off. That is not correct. If it's someone that's hurt and you've got to communicate that you need help, that's immediate safety of human life. If there's something on fire and no fire trucks are there, it's an immediate protection of property emergency. Then you could legally transmit outside of our privileges. That is allowed. Question 10. What information is contained in the preamble of a formal traffic message? This is what's sometimes called a radiogram. There's a system called the National Traffic System that they pass messages all over in whatever way that has to be passed, Morse code, voice, email, whatever. So in the preamble, that's the very beginning of the message. The answer here would be D, information needed to track the message. That's the very first thing they put at the beginning of a formal traffic message. Tracking information. And then all the rest of that stuff comes after. Number 11, what is meant by the term check in reference to that formal traffic message? Answer is A. It's a number that you put at the top of the message form before you transmit it, after you've counted the number of words in the message. Generally, they try to keep these to 25 words or less. And notice it says word equivalence. Instead of a period between sentences, they use an X. That counts as a word. So words or word equivalents, meaning short 1 or 2 letter codes that are understood. And this is again part of the national traffic system, which I've actually been spending some time working on some WinLink things involving this. So I'm learning quite a bit about NTS. Lots of things I didn't know. And finally, number 12. What is ARES, Amateur Radio Emergency Service? And this one's a little tricky because they all look like pretty good answers. Members of the military? No. Training program? No, although there are training programs for ARES service, but ARES is not a training program. You have to have an amateur license anyway first. Notice it says Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. That's RACES in the last one. So we're not talking about RACES, we're talking about ARES. The correct answer is the first one. Licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. That's what I do. That's what Steve does. A lot of us do ARES type volunteer work with agencies. One of my agencies is Seattle ACS. That is my primary allegiance. They get me first. Red Cross is also one of my allegiances. They don't really use ARES though. So anyway, voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for duty. That's pretty good key right there. That is it for these 3 sections of element 2, T2. Any questions on any of this? I'm going to stop sharing. How many people we end up with today? Not too many. Anybody need a break? At 5 o'clock, we're going to start talking about WinLink, but I can answer questions on any of this material. And if I don't know it, I'll ask Steve or anything else that you've learned so far. Is there anybody out there?
Why don't we go through one at a time and see ask people how they're doing?
Oh yeah, we could ask some people.
Yes.
Anita, how are you
Yes.
doing?
I'm
Are
doing
you
fine.
enjoying this stuff?
Yeah, I've studied it before. I just never took the test, so I'm trying to take a refresher.
Excellent, excellent. Am I
really like-
refreshing well enough?
Yes, and I really like this Wave Talkers site for the exam prep.
I just discovered it the other day because the problem I found with some of the study sites is that once you start going through the questions, they don't let you go back. This one's not doing that. So I decided to use this today. It is, and they've got a lot of great video training. Marlena, you've got a comment in the chat. Ham radio is brand new to me. Please tell me how you're doing.
Hi, Steve. This is Marlena. Can everybody hear me?
Pretty
Oh.
good, a little echoey.
Oh, okay. I'll speak up.
No, you're
How
fine.
am I doing? I'm doing good for 4 o'clock. Usually when I get off work at 4. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for asking. I guess that is it.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Emery, how are you doing?
Doing good. I'm in a similar boat as Anita. We both took the same course prior, but we never got the chance to take the test. So it's really great having this refresher. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Steve, is that it? I don't see anybody else on my list.
Hi, this is Leonardo Watson.
Oh, Leonardo, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leonardo.
Yeah, no, doing good. I didn't get much sleep last night, so today's been one of those days. But um, we're actually working with Western Alaska and some of this disaster right now. And one of the things we are possibly looking into is actually setting up a net. So, this training will go right into immediate use. So I've been working on some of the planning, and Steve, we should certainly talk a little more now that we're hoping to get some agreements, with some of the, well, a lot of tribes. And one of the things we're looking at is pretty much a mesh network out there. But anyways, that's something we can discuss at another day. But I was just kind of, some of these things are just got initiated. So, and we're running with it. So, and doing the best we can to, involve SICE and the Tribal Communications Program, because they've got, highly technical engineers who can help with, that planning aspect, and where we don't have to, hire an engineer to do, type thing. And but so we're in some of the initial planning stages. We've talked with Mutual Link about, a service provider, and so, things are happening pretty quick because the infrastructure money is available now, and so we're putting plans together to, make the best use of it. So thanks for the class, and all this information is, like I say, it's all being put to immediate use. So I appreciate it.
That's really great. You're motivated. Fabulous.
So Leo, a mesh network would work really well within some of the villages that are fairly small. You could set a couple of those up, and you could be talking to your neighbors and things like that. So that'd be neat. Those aren't going to work too well trying to go village to village because of the distances involved, but there are other solutions available for that too.
Very nice. No, good to know. And yep, no, we're looking at a wide range. So, and that, both, like you say, individuals to, the whole state. So, and even the whole North American continent, which, Steve, we've talked about before in concept, and some of these things, through satellite communications might actually, with the amount of tech expertise involved, it might be realized.
Fabulous.
Yeah, we'll just leave that for a different conversation because it gets pretty deep pretty quickly.
Yes.
I don't know if Anita bailed out before I put that other answer. There were 4 Q codes in the general class question.
I saw
12.
those. Yeah.
Well, I think she may have bailed out too soon, but yeah, I think one of the 4 people actually commonly use. Well, maybe 2 of the 4. But if you were on a traffic net, the QRV, see, the QRV is complementary to the QRU. You have either no traffic or you have traffic.
Those are the 6 that I could think of that probably use the most. QSY, QSL, QTH, QRV, QRM, QRN, QRU I left out.
Well, people don't use that so much anymore.
No, I've never heard QRU or RV. I don't think, maybe more than once or twice.
And I use QRU a lot because nobody does anymore and I just want people to remember it.
Oh, that's good. That's cool. Somebody came up with one for needing a bio break, and I don't remember what it was, but somebody made up a Q code for that, which is useful if you're working public service events and you're a long way from plumbing. So, yeah, we make up codes sometimes, but most of these are pretty common. And the nice thing is you can get a good list very quickly and easily. Well, good. I'm glad we got through those three. I think they're not difficult sections. Some new concepts in there, of course.
So Ray, do you want to stop the recording? We can wait until we see who we get for the next segment. Ray,
Hello, Ray. I must have put them to sleep.
well, unmuted, that's helpful.
Yeah, so I'm slowly getting myself back on. Sorry about that.
You almost just got a text message. So go ahead and stop the recording.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Give me a second here.